Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Tuesday, March 11th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside will be chilly today, with a high of 51.4 degrees and a low of 49.3, so you might want to grab a jacket before heading out. Coming up, we'll examine the impact of Trump's tariff policies on global markets and what experts predict will happen next. Then, we'll explore a concerning situation in California, where landlords have found ways to refuse rent payments while still moving forward with evictions. And finally, an inspiring story about former Navy SEALs who are channeling their specialized training and skills into marine conservation efforts. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Welcome to our top story this morning. Global markets are showing a mixed response following yesterday's dramatic sell-off on Wall Street, triggered by President Trump's aggressive tariff policies. For more on this developing economic story, we're joined by our financial correspondent, Ethan Parker. Ethan, walk us through what happened on Wall Street yesterday and how markets are responding today.
Thanks, Grace. Well, we witnessed what you might call a tariff tantrum on Wall Street yesterday. According to Yahoo Finance, the S&P 500 plunged 2.7%, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite skidded a whopping 4%, marking one of its worst trading days since 2022. Tech stocks took a particularly brutal beating, with Tesla shares crashing 15.4% and chip giant Nvidia falling over 5%.
Those are significant drops, Ethan. What's the picture looking like today? Any signs of recovery?
There's cautious optimism this morning. The Tribune Democrat reports that S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrial Average futures are up about 0.3%, suggesting we might see some stabilization today. European markets are showing signs of recovery too, with Germany's DAX up 0.6% and France's CAC 40 gaining 0.7%. Asian markets were more mixed. Japan's Nikkei 225 dropped 0.6%, though that's actually a recovery from deeper losses earlier in the day, while China's Shanghai Composite edged up 0.4%.
Let's get to the heart of what's causing this market turmoil. President Trump's tariff policies. Can you break down exactly what tariffs have been implemented?
Absolutely. The market is reacting to several waves of tariffs that have hit in quick succession since the beginning of 2025. On February 4th, a 10% tariff was slapped on all Chinese imports, which was then doubled to 20% just 1 month later on March 4th. That same day, a 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico also took effect, though auto imports and goods covered by the USMCA trade deal have exemptions until April 2nd. That's just 22 days from now. And tomorrow, March 12th, we'll see 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports take effect, eliminating previous exemptions.
I understand Canada has already taken some retaliatory measures. What's happening there?
That's right, Grace. According to Peak News magazine, Ontario has implemented what you might call a power play, placing a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the United States. Premier Doug Ford has criticized President Trump for starting what he calls a trade war, while Trump has fired back by labeling Canada a tariff abuser and threatening reciprocal measures. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has indicated that tariffs on Canadian dairy and lumber could take effect in April, with the U.S. claiming Canada imposes a 250% tariff on dairy products.
That sounds like a significant escalation. What are economists saying about the potential impact of these tariffs?
The concerns are mounting, Grace. As reported by the Tribune Democrat, trader Anderson Alves at Active Trades notes there's serious worry about how these tariffs will impact corporate earnings and the potential for retaliatory measures from trading partners. Analysts fear we could see a triple threat: higher inflation, slower economic growth, and destabilized global trade. Industries that consume steel and aluminum, automotive, construction, packaging, are expected to face higher costs, which could ultimately lead to higher prices for consumers.
Are there any estimates on how this might affect the overall economy?
While the direct GDP impact is expected to be relatively modest, less than 0.05% reduction according to some analysts, the indirect effects could be much more significant if we see a broader trade war develop. Yahoo Finance reports that President Trump has acknowledged there might be a transition period, but is defending these tariffs as necessary to bring manufacturing jobs and wealth back to America.
And what about oil and currency markets? How are they responding?
There's movement there too. According to Yahoo Finance, benchmark U.S. crude oil rose to $66.27 a barrel, with Brent crude increasing to $69.60. The dollar has strengthened against the Japanese yen, while the euro made slight gains against the dollar. Investors are now anxiously awaiting the U.S. Consumer Price Index data for insights into inflation as they try to gauge the full impact of these tariffs.
Thank you, Ethan, for that comprehensive tariff tour of the global markets. We'll continue to monitor this story as it develops. That was Ethan Parker with our first story of the morning. For our second story this morning, we're turning to California's rental market, where a troubling trend is emerging. Some landlords are legally evicting tenants, even when those tenants are willing and able to pay their overdue rent. Joining us to discuss this issue is our housing correspondent, Chloe Parker. Chloe, what can you tell us about this situation?
Grace, it's a case of rent and repent that's leaving many California tenants out in the cold. According to reporting from Cal Matters, landlords across the state are refusing rent payments and proceeding with evictions, even when tenants have the means to catch up on what they owe. Take Bradford and Kimberly Berger, for example. This couple has lived in a subsidized apartment in San Francisco's Tenderloin neighborhood for 15 years. They fell behind on rent after Bradford lost his wallet. But despite a local rental assistance program offering to cover their overdue rent, their landlord refused to accept the payment and continued with eviction proceedings.
That seems counterintuitive, Chloe. Why would landlords turn down money that's owed to them?
It does seem puzzling at first glance, Grace, but it highlights a significant gap in California's tenant protection laws. Unlike 21 other states that prohibit evictions when tenants can pay their outstanding rent, California currently allows landlords to choose whether to accept late payments. This means that even when rental assistance is available, landlords can still proceed with evictions if they prefer to have new tenants.
Is there any legislation in the works to address this issue?
Yes, there is. As of today, March 11, 2025, a bill is pending in the California legislature that would prevent landlords from evicting tenants for non-payment if the tenant is willing and able to pay all outstanding rent before being removed from the property. This would bring California in line with those 21 other states that already have similar protections, according to both Cal Matters and Palo Alto Online.
How widespread is this problem of non-payment evictions in California?
The numbers are quite striking, Grace. According to data analyzed by Perplexity, in Los Angeles alone, 94% of the 166,463 eviction notices filed between February 2023 and mid-November 2024 were for non-payment of rent. In San Mateo County, rent delinquency accounted for more than 85% of eviction cases in 2023. The Association of Bay Area Governments has also reported on landlords refusing rent payments as part of its coverage of housing issues in the region.
That's a significant portion of evictions. What about the effectiveness of rental assistance programs in this context?
That's a key issue, Grace. Tenant advocates argue that the current law undermines the effectiveness of rental assistance programs, which often face delays in processing. Cal Matters reports that it takes an average of 3 months for rental assistance to reach landlords, creating a critical gap during which evictions can proceed. It's a case of too little too late for many tenants caught in this bureaucratic time lag.
What's the opposition saying about this proposed legislation?
The California Apartment Association is opposing the bill, claiming it's unnecessary and would harm landlords. They argue that landlords should maintain the right to decide whether to continue a tenancy relationship, especially after non-payment issues. However, research cited by Perplexity suggests that tenant protection laws can significantly impact eviction rates, with even short notice periods potentially reducing eviction filing rates by up to 63.1%.
Has California implemented any other tenant protections recently?
Yes, the state has recently rolled out several new tenant protection policies, including changes to security deposit laws, tenant screening practices, and the eviction summons process. These measures aim to strengthen renters' rights and provide more time for tenants to respond to eviction notices. However, they don't specifically address this issue of preventing evictions when tenants can pay their outstanding rent.
Thank you for that comprehensive report, Chloe. It seems like California is at a crossroads when it comes to balancing landlord rights with tenant protections in these pay-to-stay scenarios.
Absolutely, Grace. As California continues to navigate its housing crisis, the outcome of this proposed legislation could be a game changer for tenants like the Burgers, who find themselves facing eviction despite having access to funds that could cover their overdue rent. It's a case where home sweet home hangs in the balance of legislative action.
Thanks again, Chloe, for bringing us this important story. We'll be sure to keep our viewers updated on any developments with this legislation. Here are some other headlines. Pope Francis is no longer in imminent danger, according to doctors, as he follows the Vatican's Lenten spiritual retreat from his hospital bed. The 88-year-old pontiff, who was admitted to Rome's Gemelli Hospital last month with bronchitis that developed into double pneumonia, is participating in the retreat via video conference. Despite his improving condition, his prognosis remains guarded due to chronic lung issues dating back to his youth. The retreat, themed The Hope of Eternal Life, will conclude on March 14th, just after the 12th anniversary of Francis's election as Pope. Environmental concerns are mounting after a collision between two ships in the North Sea off England's eastern coast. The US-flagged tanker MV Stena Immaculate, carrying 220,000 barrels of jet fuel for the American military, was struck by the Portugal-registered container ship Solong while anchored near Hull. The impact ruptured at least one cargo tank, releasing fuel into waters near important fishing grounds and seabird colonies. Adding to concerns, the Solong was transporting 15 containers of highly toxic sodium cyanide. 36 crew members were rescued, with one hospitalized and one missing. UK Coast Guard has deployed containment equipment as investigators from the US and Portugal lead the inquiry. Workers at Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant continue to face dangerous radiation exposure and high stress levels as the massive cleanup enters its 14th year. The complex operation, expected to take another 3 decades and cost approximately $76 billion, involves removing spent fuel, retrieving melted debris, and dismantling 3 reactors that experienced meltdowns following the 2011 earthquake and tsunami. A particular challenge is managing over 1.24 million tons of contaminated water stored in more than 1,000 tanks. Despite reduced radiation levels since the disaster, the hazardous environment and pressure to work quickly are taking a toll on cleanup personnel. U.S. legal troubles facing Indian tycoon Gautam Adani have exposed significant weaknesses in India's booming solar sector. Adani and his nephew are accused by American authorities of paying or promising hundreds of millions in bribes to Indian officials to secure overpriced solar energy contracts. The case has highlighted vulnerabilities in India's regulatory framework, including questionable tendering processes that favor large players like the Adani Group. The allegations have international repercussions, with countries including Sri Lanka and Kenya reconsidering deals with Adani's companies. The situation threatens to undermine investor confidence in India's renewable energy goals, though it may ultimately lead to a more competitive solar industry. The Black Lives Matter Plaza near the White House in Washington, D.C., is being removed following pressure from congressional Republicans who threaten to withhold federal funding. The iconic mural, painted in June 2020 by Mayor Muriel Bowser following George Floyd's murder, will be replaced by new artwork celebrating America's 250th anniversary. The removal process, costing approximately $610,000, is expected to take 6 to 8 weeks and will restore normal traffic flow to the area. Community members gathered to honor the plaza's significance before work began, emphasizing that while the physical mural can be erased, the movement's impact cannot be forgotten. In our third story this morning, we're diving into an inspiring initiative where America's elite warriors are becoming guardians of our oceans. Former Navy SEALs and Special Operations veterans are making waves in marine conservation through a unique program. Joining us with more details is our environmental correspondent, Ethan. Tell us about this Force Blue initiative.
Thanks, Grace. According to NPR, Force Blue is truly making a splash in the conservation world by recruiting former Navy SEALs and other Special Operations veterans for a new kind of mission of protecting our oceans. This nonprofit has brilliantly merged the elite skills of military veterans with critical marine conservation efforts, creating what they call mission therapy while tackling serious environmental challenges.
That sounds like they're really diving deep into meaningful work. What kinds of projects are these veterans undertaking?
They're certainly not just testing the waters, Grace. NPR reports that Force Blue has these veterans engaged in everything from coral reef restoration to building living shorelines. Just recently, in Choctawhatchee Bay, Florida, Force Blue volunteers constructed rubble barriers designed to protect shorelines from erosion while simultaneously creating habitats for native oysters. Talk about a sure thing.
I see what you did there, Ethan. Can you tell us how this work impacts the veterans themselves?
Absolutely. The NPR report highlights how this work gives veterans a renewed sense of purpose and camaraderie, which can be crucial during the often turbulent transition from military to civilian life. Take Steve Gonzo Gonzalez, for example. According to Perplexity API, this retired Navy SEAL discovered his passion for marine conservation after participating in a Force Blue mission during Super Bowl 54 in Miami. He has now gone from SEAL to Sea Guardian, working on coral reef repair and marine debris removal.
That's quite a career current. What specific conservation skills do these veterans learn?
They receive comprehensive training that would make Jacques Cousteau proud, Grace. They learn to identify marine species, combat invasive species, which you might call underwater enemy combatants, grow and transplant coral, preserve mangroves and seagrass, and remove harmful marine debris. They're essentially transferring their tactical expertise from protecting our nation to protecting our oceans.
And beyond the environmental benefits, is there evidence this work helps the veterans psychologically?
While Perplexity API notes there isn't yet specific peer-reviewed data on Force Blue's mental health outcomes, research on similar outdoor recreational activities for veterans shows promising results. These activities appear to improve psychological health by providing that crucial sense of purpose and social connection that many veterans miss after leaving service. It's like they've found a new mission that still allows them to serve a greater cause.
How are they funding these efforts to keep their heads above water financially?
According to Perplexity API, they raise funds through various events, including the Marine Corps Marathon. Though detailed information about specific funding sources isn't readily available, they seem to be staying afloat while making a significant impact on marine ecosystems through their coral restoration, debris removal, and shoreline defense systems.
Well, it sounds like these former warriors are making quite the positive ripple effect in our oceans. Thanks for bringing us this uplifting story, Ethan. From battlefields to ocean floors, these veterans are proving that conservation can be both cool and crucial.
My pleasure, Grace. As they might say in the Navy, these veterans have found a new way to be always faithful, this time to our oceans.
That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Flash 2.0, the Perplexity API, and the Google Cloud Text-to-Speech API. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.